Yeah.
I came wildly unprepared other than my split hair decision reactions. I've
Speaking of reactivity,
it keeps popping up in a bunch of different places.
the
And
loneliness thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't feel like here's a worry for me. Like I worry that I don't hold a popular opinion with stuff because I think we've talked about this. Like I don't understand that. But anyways, back to integrity for a second.
Okay.
Like
So,
forcing that upon
so to
someone else.
contextualize, I'm just gonna kind of catch up because I might use this as part of
Right.
just even a
Go
blip
for
or
it. Yeah,
something like that.
you can flip around
So,
all you
so
want.
the conversation that we came to, we started talking about Kabbalah. We started talking about how Kabbalah is all about reducing reactivity. Reactivity in Kabbalah means that it's a thought or an action that comes from a place of lack or fear. A couple of weeks ago, after Brian and I recorded our last episode, we ended and then we had some discussion regarding dad's stuff in Steamboat, the plan, how that was moving forward. And I felt like there was a discrepancy in the plan. This ultimately led to a pretty big reactive blow up on my part, not only with Brian, but with my mom. Like we're talking some text messages that were like novellas. Let me just tell you how I really feel about this. The next morning, I texted Brian and said, I'm sorry. Can we please talk about this? I've slept. I've had some space. I've now realized that even though it took me, 12 hours to have the moment of pause and say, oh, look at this. This is something that I'm reacting to. But what Brian has noticed is that lack for me is a lack of justice, which I said I think is my value of integrity, which I say is my foundational value that all my other values are rooted in. And then now tell me what you said about that.
I said having a personal sense of integrity is incredible. Like I mean I can get on board. It's something I admire about you. However, it's a personal value, and there becomes a conflict when when you force your sense of integrity and its importance onto other people and expect them to have the same greater than sense of integrity. Not everybody has a sense of integrity. There are plenty of people super happy to be shady individuals. Like they do,
Yeah.
lie to you out one side. I mean, let's just go with used car salesmen, which always get a bad rap. And I'm so sorry if anybody's a used car salesman. But let's talk the stereotypical used car salesman. Like, there's other ways to justify that. I mean, he may hit like that person's core value may be like providing for their family by any means necessary.
Right.
And so you trying to force your sense of integrity upon them does not, for them, it does not supersede their sense of needing to provide for their family. It's never going to work. They will sell you out every single time. And then it gets into the vicious loop.
Yeah.
Where they do not conform, and then you get very angry that they didn't conform. Because how could someone possibly live with that little integrity?
Right.
Just fine. That's how that person does it. I mean, I can't do that. You can't do that.
Yeah.
That person may be able to do it. A-okay.
Yes. And then I think you're right. It comes off to me as an injustice because it's like the right thing did not happen in this situation. And this has happened at work where like a situation, I mean, I think about like all the way back to like what happened with Tony at Red Rocks. That to me was injustice, but it was also because I was expecting
fairness.
Like Lamar to have integrity about how he was handling that situation, and he was completely out of integrity. And it was like, this is not just. Like, what is happening to this person is not okay. It's not right. But you're right. Like I can't expect somebody to have the same value of integrity and do the right thing.
Yeah, I'm Googling here for a moment, because I'm dying to know. I mean, I have a deep sense of what it is for myself, but moral uprightness, the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, then if you say it's having strong moral principles, we start talking about whose sense of morals.
Yeah, I mean, integrity can go very right because everybody has a different moral code,
Yeah,
right?
like
Like what is right, what
make,
is wrong.
if you've sworn to do, like, if you've sworn to make the most amount of money given any means possible, um, regardless, if you then behave that way,
Yeah,
you have a sense of integrity. Like,
right.
not, it's not my sense of integrity, but like, what better than to uphold your principles and promises, right? Like, I think they're skewed,
Yeah.
but got to give you an A for effort on upholding them.
Right. Right. No.
We dance to the beat of a different moral song, but I guess kudos.
Yeah. Which is true. Yeah, which is very true. I think I it's probably something that gets down to like the minutiae, the nuances, right, between what your moral code is and what my moral code is. But I think that there's a general like human moral code of what is right, what is wrong in a
For
certain
sure.
in most situations. The motivations behind people's actions, I think sometimes that's what's, that's what you question. They may feel like they're in integrity. It's There are times that maybe I say or do something and somebody doesn't understand why I say and do that, but it's because if I don't, I feel like I'm out of integrity. Like if I feel like if I'm not honest about how this makes me feel and how this is affecting me, then I'm out of integrity because I believe in being transparent. I believe in being vulnerable. I believe in, I guess, in a sense, like sharing my capital T truth. Not that you have to accept that, but that at least I have conveyed that.
Sure. I get that. And so that's what I'm saying is like, it's not the capital T truth, but it's your sense of it. And then other people might just have different. Something that was popping into my head while you were explaining that was like healthcare.
Mm,
So this is one that I've heard an explanation of. I'm going to basic it down. This isn't exactly the conversation, but I'm going to basic it down. Let's say overcharging for an exam. Like,
yep.
okay, that that's okay because those extra funds help fund the cancer center.
Right.
Okay, so if you come into orthopedics, we're going to overcharge you, so
Mm-hmm.
that we can keep the budget running for the cancer center. And isn't that
Mm-hmm.
okay? Like, isn't that okay? Because in the end, we're providing cancer treatment, for thousands of people every year. And I mean, you don't want people to
Yeah.
not get cancer treatment, right?
Right.
But and you're like, no, but I want you to be honest about your orthopedics.
Right.
Like, uh,
Yes.
but I mean, I've worked with people that can firmly get behind this is the way we do this, and I mean, it may not be the best way, but it is what we have to do in order to provide these services
Yeah.
for so many more people.
Right.
And then it gets really cloudy and murky, and I'm like,
It does. And it gets so like right, like they're the financial team at the hospital has goals and they know where the money's going and what we're doing this for. I can think of a specific example where I was asked to do an exam and we have protocols, right? Like we have exam preps. And it was like, well, if it was ordered stat and the prep wasn't done, you just do the exam anyway. And it's like, no, like
right.
I'm doing an undiagnostic exam because they haven't done the prep.
Right.
So
But they'll tell you,
that's,
one, you don't know that it's going to be undiagnostic. We may luck out.
well, it's a gall.
Right.
In this
Like,
sense, it's a gallbladder. Like they just eaten and then they want a gallbladder ultrasound. So their
right.
gallbladder is going to
You
be
may get lucky.
contracted.
It may be blocked up,
Right.
and then you'll see it.
Right. But
I'm giving you the answers I've heard from my own.
right. Oh, they
Own
always have an
experience.
answer. They always have an answer. They always, it's like, just do it. And if it's undiagnostic, then we can try and do it again later. Okay, but are you going to bill the patient for another exam when you do that? Like another
Right.
gallbladder exam? And that's where I'm like, it is out of integrity for me to do an exam that I know is not going to be diagnostic.
No,
And
for
that
sure.
would
I
be
get
in the
that.
situation, like I would start doing the scan, gallbladder's contracted, and it's like, well, if we're not going to get the information that we need, but I've already taken images. So what do
So,
we do in that
I mean,
situation? And they're like, no, you finish the exam and then you just write on your worksheet, that the patient had just eaten, the gallbladder was contracted, so could not be evaluated. And then it's
right,
going to get ordered again after the patient's
right,
been NPO for 6 hours. So now they're going to get billed for that second one. And it's like, that's not, that's in a sense injustice, right? But
right,
it's out of integrity for me.
right. I mean, this sounds horrible, and I'm probably not the best person to make this statement because I think I wear my feelings on my sleeve. But I think it's impossible to work in healthcare and have 100% integrity.
For sure.
It's you
For
just
sure.
cannot do it.
You can't do it.
You will be fired,
Yep.
and it's a fact that you have to come to terms with very quickly.
Yes.
And then you fall into that gray murky area of, am I doing enough good, and do I have enough integrity to offset how I feel about the other stuff?
Right.
And I mean, at this point in time, obviously I'm still employed, so yes. But I mean, I think that's
And I do. I
I
look
think
at
that's
it from
something you
like
have
a
to.
karmic scale kind of thing. Like when I'm forced to do things that are out of integrity for me, then I look at this as like, okay, going the extra mile or doing extra for another patient. Hopefully that balances the karmic scale there a little bit. It makes me feel a little bit better about it when I
Oh
have
no,
the
for sure.
opportunity to do it. But I think, I mean, I do. I think that's one of the hardest things about continuing to work in healthcare for me, is because I feel like every day I've got this values conflict right up in my face that I literally can't do anything about, because otherwise I won't have a job and,
Right.
got to pay the bills.
I mean,
So
I think that comes up. Let's get out of. I mean, it's still. I don't know. Depends on how you view healthcare. I mean, for. I guess this goes to both ways, both like the orthopedics cancer center thing and the I try and do one so I can do the other, like what you were just saying, like the karmic balance thing. Massage.
mhm.
People will come in all the time, and they think they know what the problem is. So they want you to. Oh, what's a good one here? It's like saying they want to get rid of their neck pain, but
Mhm.
they don't want their shoulders rubbed. They hate having their shoulders rubbed.
Well, they're kind of attached.
But they really like their legs rubbed. But can you get rid of the neck pain?
Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
Go ahead and lay down.
Right.
Um, because that I'll do my best given your parameters. That's how I justify it.
Mhm.
I will do my very best to get rid of your neck pain by massaging your legs, knowing full well that I'm doing no good whatsoever.
Right.
Because that allows me to continue doing this job for the people that come in. And because if I threw out every single client, I mean, I could say, nope, can't do it, get out. I mean, I do try and have the conversation of, well, this is linked to this, and this is where we should be focusing the work. And but if they're still if they're hard fast rule of no shoulders, okay, guess we're gonna work around that,
Yeah.
because that allows me to keep a clientele big enough so that I can keep working for the people that actually want to get the work done. Integrity? Ugh, I don't know.
Yeah. And I think it's on, I think it's on a different scale too. Like there's certain situations where it's like your integrity or stepping out of your integrity there's more dissonance in it than, some of
for
the
sure.
smaller things,
100%. I think you feel it for sure. I think you can gauge each and every time you step out. There is that chord that's struck, and it's how loud it is for sure.
Right. And there's like a
because
tolerance.
There's plenty of situations where like we have done plucked the whole guitar string or swung the mallet at the gong kind of thing, and not just you, but the whole damn room knows.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. So sure. I mean, I think in that whole situation, I mean, I don't know how that gets worked out. And honestly, I'm trying to think how we even led into all of this, like the justice thing. Because I mentioned too that like you and I were having two very different conversations. Like mine was an emotional conversation.
That's where it started.
Yours, you were trying to have like a tactical conversation, and then it was like there was that mismatch. Like you're having one conversation and I'm having another conversation, and it was like, okay, we're not speaking the same.
No, I think we talked about that a little bit. Like rarely are people speaking my language. I feel like I spend most of my time navigating other people's languages. I feel like no one speaks Brianese, like at all. Like I think you get glimpses of it, like you're a conversationalist. You definitely know conversational Brianese. And then there's other people. I think Jim probably speaks it pretty good. But for the most part, I find myself being the translator more so than anyone speaks my language.
Yes. So I'm only on like chapter 2 of this. I told you that I was listening to another Rich Roll podcast. Of course, I didn't send it to you because I'm trying not to overload you. But the guy wrote a book called Super Communicators, and it's like this breakdown of the people who are really, really good at communication and how are they so good at communication. And I think that is, gosh, it's like the basis for everything, right? Like communication is what it's life. It's how we, how you communicate with other people is, I mean, I don't know that there's anything that's much more important than that. And it's not just in relationships. It's like your personal relationships, your communication at work, your communication. Okay, but here's our segue.
Here's our segue into loneliness, I guess.
Yes.
So the bigger than your communication with others, I think it's much more important to have strong communication with yourself. Like that supersedes everything for me. Can I live with myself at the end of the day? Do I feel like I have integrity? Do I feel like I did my best job? Do I feel like I've done some of the hard work? Like, I feel like this, I mean, is exactly like the opposite definition of resonance, but it's like, can I resonate with myself? Can my soul resonate with my mind? Mm-hmm. Can I go to bed and feel okay about myself? I think that's supersedes. And then next would probably be with others, but I feel like if you've got a really strong sense of self, Jesus Christ, you crazies. Stop. Sorry.
All right. I mean, I think this is now just like a part of the episode.
I know, right? We should just highlight reel that shit. Just me flipping out on the dogs. We'll make like a 1 year highlight reel of me like, fucking knock it off.
Right. Cut that shit out. Yes. Because I mean, I really do think it's happened every episode.
I think so too.
which is fine. I
Yeah,
mean,
we go through.
that's real life.
Well, and someday I'll have a place where I can. I mean, I'm literally sitting halfway between the dining room and the kitchen and
Yeah.
the living room because I have no space. But okay, so what I was saying, I think if you have if you have a good sense of communicating with yourself, then you're able to be alone. I think sometimes I would say I know some people that are great communicators to other people, and then they cannot sit with themselves at the end of the day, and it becomes like their social life and everything else is this crutch on which they use to not ever be alone with themselves. And
Mhm.
so this is one of those places that I was thinking about that I was like, oh my God, I want to talk about the loneliness thing because I have some weird opinions about it. I
And
feel
this
like
was actually like
being,
triggered by the experiences you had of going back and dealing with
yeah,
dad.
going back and
Yeah.
being in dad's house for a little bit and seeing obvious loneliness. And there's a great example of someone who was not okay sitting with himself. Um,
Mm.
it, it, the evidence is all over the place of from the hobbies to the writings to the like sometimes I feel like maybe the music was an escape a little bit to not have to think. Like he had to focus to not have to be alone in that place. Um, but he then framed that in terms of loneliness again.
Mhm.
And it just because I don't think he was all right sitting with himself.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
he talked one very big talk and lived a completely separate life. Like he had
Mhm.
a forward facing life and then he had his behind closed doors life. And I think the dissonance between those two things um, just made one side, the more he blew up one side of it, the other side
Yeah.
became even worse, kind of thing. The more he proclaimed how like awesome he was at everything and all of those, like he had the best of the best and he his hobbies were impeccable, like
Mhm.
fishing's for morons but fly fishing is for the elite.
Right.
But
Right.
shut
It's like
up.
the next same thing with like gun, hunting with a gun versus hunting with the bow and arrow. It was
Right.
like I hunt with a bow and arrow because that's true hunting versus like,
Yeah,
I mean,
everything
he
was like
hated the fact that like when Sean and his dad would talk about going up into the deer stand, and he's like, that is not hunting. When you sit in a stand and you put
it's not.
feeders out, and I agree. I completely agree. Hence the reason I never went hunting with them because I'm like, this is no, you're trapping them. You're trapping them and then you're shooting them. That's not hunting. That's not the game. Whereas he used to literally track the animal
Right.
and shoot, and the deer, Lord knows the deer ahead. That is still in limbo where that's going to end up. But it's like, but he was very proud, and it was an accomplishment because he got it with the bow and arrow. He tracked it, and he
No,
got it
for
with the bow
sure.
and
But he
arrow.
took the pride past pride and into judgmentalness kind of thing.
Yes.
And so like here we go back. There's going to be so much that we talk about that I'm going to go, and then we're back to right where we started. So that judgmentalness of other people was just one more step towards being lonely. No one likes hanging out with an asshole.
Yeah.
And there were points when that attitude of I'm the best or you have to be on my team to be the best. And if you're not on my team, then you suck,
Mm-hmm.
pushes people away. And then you look around
Yeah.
one day and you're like, wow, I have no one around me. Well, it's because none of us can compete with how elite you are, how great you are. Like,
Yeah.
no,
I think there's two things here though. The first is kind of like the difference between being alone and being lonely. So, you can be alone, and yes, I do think it is like everybody needs to learn how to be alone and be okay with being alone. Um I feel like I've gone very far to that side to where I'm so okay being alone now that it's not, I wouldn't say it's the most positive thing. But
Right.
I realized that I had to do that when I moved to Denver. And there was like one day where all of my friends had other stuff going on. I had no plans and I had to sit at home by myself, which was like the first time that had ever happened. And it was like, ew, this sucks. Well, now I got to like sit here with my thoughts and sit here with my, but over time, it's like I recognize I'm like, I have to learn how to be okay being alone and doing these things. Whereas loneliness is this feeling, you can be in a room full of people and feel lonely because nobody knows you, nobody sees you, nobody truly gets you.
For sure. There's that, I guess, but so I also feel like there's a trap there too of
Mm-hmm.
you're looking for this. To me, that almost sounds like outside validation. Like
Mm-hmm.
you need those people to see you and acknowledge you, and then this goes back into, man, if I'm cool with myself, like, and I mean that integrity kind of, like if I'm
Right,
good with
right.
me,
Yeah.
I don't need the social recognition or the, do my feelings never get hurt if I don't get invited to the birthday
Right.
party? I mean, that's not true. Of course they get hurt once in a while. Um,
And I don't think it's
but
about the validation. I think it's about like as humans, and we know this now from like research and science, and we've proven this that we need connection with other
right,
people, like a true connection.
right.
So I
Okay, so
pulled
here's
up,
the difference. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I pulled up some statistics
Okay.
about loneliness that kind of, is relating to this conversation. So 52% of Americans report feeling lonely. 40,
Ever, does it say ever, or like is that their state of being? Any
I think they just, and it may be intermittent, but
okay.
they feel
A
lonely.
general
Okay.
sense of.
Right.
Okay.
Right. 47% report that their relationships with others aren't meaningful. So that's like I might have relationships, but I don't feel like there's depth or like a true connection, or that we see each other, know each other well. Here's
Okay.
one I found super interesting. Las Vegas, Washington, D.C., and Denver are the three loneliest cities in the US. Statistics show loneliness is 3 times higher than the national average in those cities.
Okay.
58% of Americans reported that they sometimes or always feel like no one knows them well. Statistics show that 1 in 3 people, or close to 33% of people in the US, experience loneliness on a regular basis.
Okay.
61% of younger people in the US say that they are chronically lonely. And that one broke my heart
Okay.
because probably the least lonely I've ever felt in my life was in my younger years.
Sure. Oh no, and we talk about this all the time. Like, whatever happened to just like driving up to your friend's house and walking in the front door?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know when that stops, but at
Yeah.
some point it stops. Um, and it becomes socially unacceptable. But I just totally remember, like, you're driving down the street and you're passing the street your friend lives on, and you're like, hell, I'm gonna go
I'm
crash
just
their
going to
house.
bebop
Yeah,
in.
like
Yeah.
you just pull up to the curb, you don't call, not like,
Yep.
you just walk right up into the door. If they're a real good friend, you just walk the hell on
Yep.
in.
Yep.
And then you end up spending like 7 hours. Like, you
Just
stayed
hanging
so
out.
late, they're like, I guess we're eating together. Should we get pizza?
Right.
Um, and I mean, if we go back far enough, like, I mean, shit, then you wake up and you're on their couch and you're like, shit, it's like 7 o'clock in the morning and I somehow spent the night at my friend's house. And I realize that there's some responsibilities that you grow in life that, you
Right.
can't leave the kids at home till 7 o'clock in the morning unattended. Um, but like those things, I mean, I definitely used to drag Brandon to friends' houses. Like,
Yep.
we'd just be cruising along and like, hey, you want to swing by and see what so and so's doing?
Right.
Um, and when does that stop? Like, and when do people
Yeah.
stop coming to your house? Like, what kind of a nasty bitch were you?
Yeah.
That after this date, they
Right.
were like, we were gonna swing by Kristen's, but
Not anymore. Not anymore. And I mean, I think obviously, I think social media plays a part in this, that it's like we feel like we're connected through technology. There's less human interaction. How much of that is feeding the loneliness? Because truly, too, like, okay, you might have 385 followers on Instagram, but of those 385 followers, how many of them really know you? Really know
Right.
you?
Right. I mean, that, okay, so that's one that I find, okay, but I feel like I need to drop my big bomb on my views on loneliness.
Okay.
Because then it like ties into so many, like I just see it from a very one-sided perspective.
Yeah.
So my big bomb is I feel like loneliness is self-created. It is, excuse maybe some of the terms I get to try and explain myself, but like it is not a mental illness, but it's a mental condition. Like
Hmm.
I think it's a choice. I think other things can like narrow the path into where you feel like it's your only choice, but at the end of the day, I really feel like so much of this is self-imposed, and we constantly are blaming other things for our loneliness,
Yes.
and as a way to not accept that we've put ourselves in these positions, and that's probably way outside most people's like comfort zone, but I think loneliness is something you choose.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's a subconscious choice.
Oh, for
So
sure.
when I think about it, I'm like, okay, there's all these like parameters to it. Like COVID created separation from people.
Yeah,
Social
but I
media
think
has created separation from people. Um,
no, it's created the opportunity for separation from people, and
yes.
people chose
Yes.
to, so you choose to get on social media,
Right.
period. You
Right.
don't want to feel like you're surrounded by a bunch of people that don't know you, get the fuck off social media. Like that's instant fix. Get the fuck
Sure.
off social media.
Sure. But therein
Okay.
is the problem, is because now we're so trained, and I don't want to use the word that like we I mean we have, though, we've been conditioned now by social media, by these apps, by the psychology behind this, to it's addictive. It's created a new behavior. And so the idea of saying I'm going to get off social media and meet people in real life seems so foreign. And not only that, but it's like so awkward for so many people, because after so many years of only connecting online, it's like we've forgotten how to have a conversation with a
No,
stranger.
for sure. Of course, it's terrifying. But I mean, to me, when you say things like that, I'm going to take it all the way to the extreme and be like, it is literally no different than get off drugs and go get a fucking job.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's the obvious choice, right? You don't like the fact that you've got track marks, you've overdosed 4 times, and you've lost everyone in your life. Well, then fucking check into rehab. Like, you got to find your own bottom, and then, and maybe that's it. Everyone has to find their own bottom with social media.
Right.
Um, you don't like being lonely, analyze what's causing it. You don't like constantly being broke and being in the hospital for overdosing. What's causing that?
Right.
I just, and so, but that's your explanation to me a little bit means exactly what I say. Like, it's this helpless, now that
Hmm.
these things have happened to us. I was never lonely during COVID. Never. Not
Yeah.
once. I thought it was fucking
Yeah.
fantastic. I actually
I was an
made more
introvert.
connections, but not just the introvert part, but it showed me who, which relationships to focus on in my life.
For sure.
We made it a point to still connect via Zoom. Is it the same as
Yes.
a hug? Hell no. But it wasn't that bad.
It was every
It
Wednesday wine night.
exactly every Wednesday wine night. It became very clear that we had family members that I was not going to be able to see for a long extended period of time. And so I took a play out of the playbook with you, and I set them up with Aunt Jeannie. And we did birthdays that way. We did
Mm-hmm.
birthday parties via Zoom. Um, but when everything was opening back up, like it was amazing to me to focus on those things that I
Yeah.
was like, hot damn, despite this big old mess of a problem, um, these are the relationships that blossomed and persisted, and despite the fact
Mm-hmm.
that we were under an immense obstacle to overcome. Great. Now I know where to focus my attention and continuing fostering those relationships.
Yeah.
I This goes, so another one with, like, you see these statistics. Well, okay, so COVID, and then everyone was like, oh shit, now you have to work from home. And then we open back up and people are like, I'll stay here.
Yeah.
And then you bitch about being lonely.
Right.
Well, get your ass back to the office.
Yeah.
You can't feel like we want this perfect utopia with everything. You can't have it all, people.
Right.
Like,
It's true.
you
It's true.
have
I
to
mean,
realize that
and
this and this and this and this, like,
I don't want to
they
like,
offset the seesaw. um but I'm not saying it's like it's easy, and you just, and that, for anybody that doesn't know my past, long history of drug abuse. So I'm certainly not thinking that it's an easy job, but my one day at a time kind of thing is very simple. It is a choice.
mm-hmm.
Like, do I want to take the chance of going back to that shithole life,
Right.
or do I want to this? Do I want to be lonely,
Yeah.
or do I want to take a little bit of a risk and go down to the local brewery and have a pint?
Right.
I don't know. We're playing here,
Sure.
but
And I think, I don't want to just like stigmatize social media as like, this is the downfall of all the human race. I do think it's a problem. I do think that we need to look at our relationship with it, but it's also things that came out of COVID too, that still exists. So you can now order your groceries online and go just park in a parking space, and the guy comes
you
out, brings
choose.
your grocery, right? And these are all choices. DoorDash now, or Uber Eats, all these things that became available to fit a need during COVID are still around. And it's a choice of saying, okay, I could go on the Albertsons app and I could order all my groceries, and I get the notification that my groceries are ready. And then here comes Kyle, because I always get Kyle, comes out to the truck, puts my groceries in, done, right? The other choice would be to go into the store and shop like we used to do. And you
Right.
have interactions with other people shopping at the same time. You have interactions maybe with the butcher or the person working in the deli. You have an interaction with the person who's checking you out and the bagger. Like, so you take one connection that happens when you order online and go pick your groceries up versus the 5, 6, 7 maybe connections that you've made in grocery shopping. You're right. It's a choice, but why are we always choosing the the path of
So I'm
less
not, and
connection? Yeah.
this is where I don't get it. I mean, there are definitely social situations that I avoid like the plague, 100%. And this is by no means me waving my perfect flag, but I don't do those things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I definitely am someone who chases the tangible in the real life. I don't want a virtual tour of some foreign city. I just want to
Right.
like spend money I don't have and fly halfway around the world and go tour it in person.
Right.
Um, it would be a hell of a lot cheaper on my bank account if I would just do it online, which I don't know if we've ever talked about this. So you can take like city tours
Yeah.
via Zoom.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
Um, and then, but I always wonder. People are like, "Oh yeah, Rome last summer was amazing." Was it though? So I look at each of those things, like everything involved in this, and I'm like, well, you had an option to choose something else.
Yeah.
Like, and if you don't like your situation, change it.
Yeah.
And that goes for everything.
For
Um,
sure.
if you don't like, if you're sitting there and you're like, boohoo me, I'm so lonely, then don't be.
Right.
I'm going to take some tangible steps. Or I'm going to start small and I'm going to go to the grocery store for my own groceries.
Yep.
Start there. You don't have to
Yep.
interact with anybody, but maybe getting out time and time and time and time again will eventually lead to you being like, hi,
Yeah.
oh my word, first connection.
Find a place to volunteer that you actually have to go there in person to do the volunteer thing because you're meeting other people. Obviously, whatever you choose to volunteer and you have an interest in, I would hope. And then you're meeting people through that.
Get a job, get an in
Work. I mean, although,
in-house job.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like I'm almost 8 months at this hospital, and there's probably, I can count them on one hand, people that I actually like and I think are good people, that I would want to continue a relationship with. But this goes back to like what I told you when I first started. And I'm like, so there's 5 of us sitting in a room. Nobody's got patients, right? So we share space with the vascular techs and everybody's on their phone, head down in the phone, doing something, watching Netflix on their phone, not talking to the other individuals that are literally sitting in the same room as them.
No, for sure. And I've been in that environment
Start
at
a
some
conversation with
hospitals.
you start a conversation and they look at you like you're fucking crazy. Like,
Yeah,
don't
you've
bother
interrupted
me.
my time for
I'm
sure.
now playing bedazzled and I almost won, but you interrupted me and now I lost my game. I mean, it's
Right.
unreal how
No,
much
I get it.
people just don't choose connection when it's right there.
I lucked out because I started at a place that I'd like to burn to the ground some days. But I work with people who actively try and be social together.
Mhm.
Um, Now let's be very clear when I say actively try and be social together. Last hockey game I went to with my coworkers, I didn't speak to a single one of my coworkers. We were sitting 2 rows back and probably 10 seats over. We waved hi, and I just enjoyed the hockey game. But we actually had no work to work interaction.
Yeah.
But where that changed is when we all got back to work, we'll call it on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, what'd you think of the game? What is it?
Right.
So it sparked that connection, even though with it, none of it. And we talked about, okay, this is a little weird. We're all hockey game together, and like, are we not going to hang out afterwards and
Right.
talk? Like, no. So I left with a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth, and then when I got to work, and that's all we talked about for the first 4 hours we were there was like, what do you think of this? And oh my word, wasn't that fight crazy? And like, and I was like, oh, this like I'm glad I chose to go, even though I didn't connect with anybody at the game. Like this
Right.
has provided a platform, and it was very obvious in the department who went to the game and who did not, because the
Yeah.
ones that chose not to go didn't have a whole lot to contribute to the group. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, well, I'd like to feel bad for you, except for that you chose not to go with
Right.
us.
Right.
Everyone got invited.
Yes.
I'm sorry. And for those people that had other plans, let's say grandma was in town this weekend and you couldn't go to the hockey game because you were spending time with grandma. That goes back to that being okay with yourself.
Right.
Like, I wasn't there and I didn't get to go to the hockey game, but that's okay because I got to, and that is what my priority was. And
Right.
so now I'm okay not maybe connecting about the hockey game at work, but I will get to tell you all about how special it was to spend time with grandma.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just, I think there's so much of the want to have your cake and eat it too
Mm-hmm.
that we have forgotten. One, I don't think that's possible. And another thing, I think we want everything to be handed to us. And I'm guilty of it
Oh,
sometimes.
100%.
But
Instant gratification.
yeah, and that's the have your cake and eat it too. It's like all tied in together. And we forget that not being lonely in this case takes some effort. It takes some
Yeah.
uncomfortableness. It takes some inconvenience. It so I look back at let's tie us back into Mark.
Yeah.
We lived 1, 2, 2 states away.
Yes.
2 states away, and not one time did he ever come see me.
Hmm.
If there was going to be I mean, we saw each other on my end.
Right.
It
Right.
was important to me to get to here to go see Mark.
Right.
I made that a priority to have that connection in my life. I also got to check the dad box. Like, this is missing from my life. I feel like I don't have a father, whatever
Hmm.
that may be. Okay, I need to fill that. I'm going to make a choice to go spend time with my dad. I'm whatever that box is, whatever the cup's only half full and I want it filled all the way. I took the initiative to get the cup as full as I needed it to be for me.
Yeah.
Maybe not as full as other people would have liked it, maybe, but I did it for myself.
Hmm.
Again, like, self responsibility. So he had these opportunities to do these other things, and there were obviously substance abuse issues with him, which I get.
Hmm.
Again, that was a choice. He got
Hmm.
sober. At some point, he made some choices in his life to change that.
Yeah.
At any given point, he could have reached out. You were there
Yes.
for connection, and he chose to be disconnected.
Well, he chose to hide it. He
Right.
chose to hide it. Like, and even, I think, even when he knew that I knew that he had
Right.
relapsed, he continued to choose to hide it. When to me, I'm like, that was the opportunity for him to say, I've relapsed and I need help while you're here, while you're here.
Right.
But he didn't, wouldn't. And I get it. I mean, I would imagine, I don't know that I can ever say that I've been addicted to something at that level, but I would imagine that there's a lot of shame involved in even
Oh,
admitting
100%.
admitting that, especially when you've relapsed, right?
Sure.
And he
Here we go
couldn't
again. I mean,
he couldn't make that admission to me, and I couldn't stay in that situation. It wasn't healthy. I
no,
had
for sure.
and it wasn't my problem, so I had to go, and I did, and I think it got worse from that point
100%.
forward. And you're right, it was a choice, but like this, and so I guess now this like pulls, the addiction part into the loneliness part. And addiction doesn't have to be a substance. Sometimes it's just addicted to
No,
not wanting to connect with other people. It's an addiction to
I think the loneliness
gaming.
led to the relapse, not the relapse led to the loneliness.
Mm,
I don't think we relapsed and then
I think it flipped. I think,
we suddenly stopped talking to people because there
yeah,
was a whole lot of time where we can say we know he was clean,
yeah, yeah,
and he was self-isolating.
yeah,
He chose to leave where we all lived
yes,
to go to northern Colorado, up
yes,
to Fort Collins. Then he chose to further self-isolate. Granted, in some ways, he definitely moved closer to his friends, but he
mm-hmm,
moved even further from his family, because
yes,
a quick drive up from Denver, where the airport is, to Fort Collins, not so much to ask. A
right.
quick drive from Denver up to Steamboat, you lost a day now. Like, it
Right.
becomes
And in
prohibitive.
winter months, it's literally treacherous
Right.
trying to get up there.
So these are all choices along the way. And at some
Yeah.
point, I feel like there had to be some self awareness of, like, wow, I have really stuck myself in a hole here. And then there comes
Mm-hmm.
that choice. Maybe I should sell this and get back to Fort Collins.
Mm-hmm.
It living in living anywhere is a choice.
Yes.
And if you don't like that you're lonely, you can move. You can move closer to family. And not everyone has family that they can move closer to. Not
Yeah.
saying that, But like, you could move closer to friends, you can move closer to family.
You
You
know
can move,
what's
if
interesting to
something's not
me?
working for you, you have a choice to change your surroundings.
What's interesting to me is I had a conversation with him, and this was right before I moved to Spokane for the first time. And he asked me why I was moving to Spokane. And it was like, well, just things in Denver, like Denver's changing. It doesn't feel like the same city that it used to be anymore. This was right after they legalized marijuana and all the Californians came in. And just the infrastructure of the city was not ready for that. But I think I was also going through changes like as a human.
Right.
And I said, so, I'm going to come up here and be closer to mom and closer to Brian, closer to Kate, closer to family in general, so that I have those people like my anchors. And he's like, I just want to make sure that it's not because you're trying to escape something, because no matter where you go, there you are. And
Right.
moving a location doesn't change what's going on in here.
Sure.
And I think that him saying that was almost like his advice or his recognition of that in himself.
No, for sure. And so then he says it, and I'm being super critical. I'm not trying to be. I mean, I really like the guy. Um, then you chose to not like, I mean, you may have chose to stay in one place, but then you just said you should sit with it and fix you rather than continually move. And then you chose to sit and not fix you and be
Yeah.
lonely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I never once got an invite to Steamboat.
yeah,
Never once. Um,
so the way that you phrased that, you said that you think the relapse led to the loneliness.
no, I think the loneliness led to the relapse.
Okay. And I think it switched at some point, because I think then the
Oh, yeah,
alcoholism led to the loneliness
I think
because
it
he
furthered
couldn't
it for sure.
function
Right.
in his normal. I mean, it started with not being able to work, then it started with not being able to even connect with his friends at the lake that was like a 4-minute drive from the house. And
No.
probably because he couldn't either A, was too intoxicated to drive, or couldn't go a long enough period of time without drinking before he would get withdrawal
Right.
symptoms.
So, I mean, the way I see it is there was this point where we went to go visit him. That would be the both of us.
Mhm.
And the guy's got on running shoes and he's lost a ton of weight and he's putting down a 5K every day. And he's going to church
How weird was
and
that, by the way? It was just like,
right, like,
what?
oh, we'll talk off camera about how much I did not know about that. Um, but I mean, this is all like post-mortem insights. Apparently really going to church and seems pretty damn happy. And then I see the switch come when we physically isolated.
Mhm.
We moved out to some place which I've only seen it in the last year and a half. I can't even imagine how isolated it was 6 years ago.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's mind blowing to me. When did he buy it? 20,
2013.
2013. So 10 years ago. I
Yeah.
can't even imagine. It had to
Yeah.
have been the only damn thing out there. Okay.
Pretty
So
much.
like he puts himself out there and then he loses church because he literally can't drive to it. He loses the ability to run because he moves someplace where there's like a boatload
Nothing
of
but
snow, a
hills.
steamboat load of snow.
Steamboat load of
Um,
snow and hills in
and
every
yeah,
direction.
in every direction for X number of months a
Yes.
year. And I mean, we all know what it's like to quit running and then try and pick it back up again. It's real hard, folks.
Yeah.
Um, but so he physically isolates, which then leads to a further social isolation,
Mhm.
which leads to a decrease in his physical abilities, which then decreases his mobility, which then decreases, like, these are all at any point we could have pulled the brake, but I think he ends
Yeah.
up sitting out there. He sees, wow, I made some mistakes. I think we don't like sitting with that. We're not right with ourselves. We aren't having the come to Jesus talk we need to have. And we start drinking.
Mhm.
And then, I mean, I don't know. It's a joke. It's a common thing about like, well, I'm not drinking alone. No, he was, and he knew he
Yeah.
was. Like he knew he
Yeah.
was taking those
Yes.
chances
Yes.
by driving out to the middle of nowhere with a brand new bottle of whatever it was. I mean, this is literally like
Yeah.
it's a joke at this point that's a big red flag is when you're sitting out someplace drinking alone.
Right.
And you chose to do that. You chose to do that.
And I
And
just wonder how much of that, I mean, this
then
all
it
this
took
this
off.
this goes into like neuroscience and all of that, like the study of addiction, right? Like addiction is, and I think especially with alcohol, there's not very many people that you hear that have quit and are sober, and it's not a struggle for them nearly every day to not do the thing.
Mm,
It's just that willpower. It is that discipline. It is that, like, I know what that led to. I mean, I think like listening to Rich Roll, he is very adamant about sobriety and how bad alcohol is for everybody for so many different reasons, right? But still
sure.
will admit that it is hard for him to be in social situations where there's alcohol in the open and not give in to just like, well, just one drink or one glass, because that's always how it starts, right? One beer, one glass of wine, and then it turns into,
Oh no, for sure. And that's
you
what
know,
happened with him. I remember him going and having beers with us and us both being
yes,
like, oh shit.
yeah.
Um,
And not to the level of getting intoxicated, but it was just like,
no, literally one
oh,
beer, I
oh,
think.
we're
We were like, oh,
drinking
we're
again.
drinking again.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and we probably should have noticed. I mean, we did notice then. Um, and maybe we should have had the conversation with them. I think we might have had some of the conversation sitting at dinner with them about it. I guess what I'm trying to say though is like in the I'm not saying that things can't get away from you
Mhm.
and become something you can't do on your own. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll vouch for that.
Yeah.
Um, but those steps up front are a lack of vigilance, are a lack of commitment. Um, so that it doesn't gain momentum and you lose control of it. I think
Yeah.
there's I think if you were just to Google how not to be lonely, like I think there's probably some very simple steps. Um, and we joke about it, but it's
Yeah.
like, don't order your groceries online.
Right.
Like, let's start
Yes.
there.
Yes.
Take some small steps to where you have to get out in the world and you have to,
Yes.
and that, okay, let me put a caveat on that. Don't order your groceries online every time.
Right. Right.
Like, girl, if it's a tough week, get your grocery game on. Okay. But making that a habit and then cutting out all social interactions of your life, where
Yes.
do you think that's going to lead?
Right.
Um,
Right.
social media. I have social media. Um, I just choose not to use it as my social life.
Right.
Like I don't.
I only use it for business at this point. Like it's literally, that's all I ever post on social media is for the business.
Oh, this hooker can fall into a 3 hour scroll hole. I love it. I
I'd
love it.
still look at my personal profile to see like maybe what friends are up to that I haven't talked to in a while.
Oh,
It's like,
there.
oh, look at
Stop.
that. So and so had a
Stop.
baby.
Oh, you're killing me.
But
Right
it's
there. No,
people
stop
that,
there.
okay.
You can't get on to see what your friends are up to. Pick up the fucking phone and ask them.
Okay, so
Yeah, this
here's,
is not how you connect with people. And this is not how you find out how people are, what's going on in someone's
you're
life.
you're totally right. You're totally right. However, like this is, and I think this has been since the beginning of Facebook, right? But it was like, how many friends do you have on Facebook? Oh, you've got
Who gives
700
a
friends.
fuck?
Right. But it was like, do you talk to all 700 friends on Facebook? No, you fucking don't. And as you move through life and go through phases of life, there's people that you have connected with on social media that maybe you don't still connect with them in life, in real life.
Okay, so let's change the terms of what we're going to call this then. You don't get on to see what your friends are doing. You get on to people watch strangers. Because that's who they are if you're
Well,
not making personal connections with them.
but some of them are
No,
like, or no, but they're accounts that I follow, like inspirational posts or whatever. And then the next one is like
okay, those aren't friends either, though.
my friend Katie that lived in Denver, and
When is
like,
the
because
last
we're
time you
still
talked to
friends.
Katie?
When I lived in Denver.
Then you ain't friends.
No, no,
Okay, so don't call Katie your friend.
I
She's
was
not your friend.
acquaintance.
Sure, we can even go with that, but honestly, at
Yes,
this point, Katie is a stranger to you.
yes,
You know
100%.
nothing. You know nothing outside of social media about Katie's life. And
Yes,
can we all agree that social media is not an accurate representation of someone's life?
100%.
It is only a face that they want you to see.
Yes,
So at the end, and this goes back to truly knowing someone, right?
yes, meaningful.
If you're contributing,
47% report that their relationships with others aren't meaningful. So you're right. Katie and I have no meaningful relationship right
yep,
now.
yep. And Katie does not know the true you, and you don't know the true Katie. Okay, so
100%.
at this point, you and Katie are not friends. In my head, this is
Yes.
how I'm narrating my own conversation. Oh, we ain't friends. We haven't talked in 6 years. That's not a
Yeah.
friend. Now, that's maybe there's a middle ground, some purgatory of friendships where they all go when they're not dead, but they're not active, kind of
Yeah.
thing. Because it would definitely be easier to respark a friendship with Katie after X amount of time, having already had some groundwork laid in the past.
Sure.
Totally get that. But this goes to the flip side of like X number of people say that no one really knows them. Well, then don't post your fake ass life online.
Right.
Like, if you want people to really know you, be honest with yourself. Conversation with yourself again.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Post your vulnerable shit. Not your bitching and complaining and all the way the world has wronged you.
Your trauma vomiting.
Yeah, like post some of the things like talk about your feeling loneliness. Not as a way to clickbait people into making contact with you. It's not social threatening. Like, we have people in our life that don't know if I can make it.
Right.
Shut the fuck up.
I mean, Danielle is a perfect example of this. Like, do Danielle and I talk like all the time? No. But we check in with each other.
Yes.
From time to time. When we did the trip down to Tulum, I was like, well, I am not going to be the third wheel on this trip. I hadn't talked to Danielle in probably 6 months. And I texted her, I'm like, hey, buddy, do you want to go to Mexico? She's like, hell yes, I do. Same thing when I was taking care of dad, came down to Denver, and she's like, you've got a place to stay. Come stay with me. And when I got to her house, I mean, it was like we didn't miss a beat. It was like we caught right back up. And 100%. So to me, like, I don't talk to Danielle every single day.
No.
There's times we go months
but it hasn't
talking.
been 6 years since you talked to Danielle.
No. And in fact, it's been months again. And I texted her this morning because I'm like, hey, buddy, I need a reference for my new job. Would you be willing to give me a reference? And then she's like, we also need to plan our next vacation. Right.
There you go.
It's like,
see? Yeah.
So she is a friend. I would consider her a friend.
I would consider her a friend.
And she knows me.
Yes, 100%. And I mean, I'll say she knows you on the level that you want her to know you on, and you are seen by her on the level you want to be seen. And I don't know what that magic time limit is, and I have a feeling that it's a different number for every single friendship in your life. But I guess there's some flags for me. Like, do I want to tell that person? Like, I consider someone a friend when something big happens in my life, and at least at some point the conversation or the self conversation happens of, I need to let them know this happened. Maybe not that day, not in the moment, but within a shorter period of time of something big happening in my life.
Sure.
Oh my God, I need to let Aaron and Evan know I got a new job. Oh, I need to let so and so know that we're planning on going to Europe next year, and they're invited. Like, they those people are the ones that pop up into my life, and when they do pop up into my life, I think it's important. And this, again, it's a choice.
Yes.
Make contact, use that as an
Hmm.
opportunity. You asked for a job reference. I would encourage you to go one step further and side conversation that, and find out what's going on in Danielle's life. I'm
Oh, and
sure
we
you
did.
will.
And we
Right,
did.
okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, so yes, like sometimes those things pop up where there's a functional utility to maintaining the friendship, but at the same time, use those opportunities to create that deeper sense of
Yes.
connection and reconnect. And
Yes.
absolutely. But I think when we talk about social media and we say, I've got 700 friends and none of them know me. No, you don't have fucking 700 friends.
Right.
You don't.
Right.
You got two, and that's okay.
Right.
Two's fine if you're happy with two.
I'm
If
a
you
big
want
believer
10,
in quality over quantity when it comes to the friend circle. I think this is just something that happens as we age too. The number of meaningful, close, intimate, inner circle relationships that we have gets smaller because we want that depth, and it's hard to have that depth with 700 people.
no, for sure. And I mean, I'm like scanning through my head. I'm like, oh
Mhm.
God, do I have any friends? But like, whatever my own definition is, but
Yeah.
two, maybe
Yeah.
two.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends.
Right.
Um, none of them know me.
Right.
Like, they have a general gist of my personality kind of
Right.
thing.
Right.
But I can think of two people in this entire world outside of family or spouse, um, that I can say know me.
Yeah.
Um, I don't want any more. Like,
Yeah. I know. I know.
I'm okay with two.
Me
I'm
too.
okay with two. Um, and but if
Yeah.
I did want more, I know the steps I took with those two
Yes.
people to bring them into the inner fold, um, and connect on that level. And there's
Yes.
some other people I would probably consider doing that with it, but
Yeah.
this whole narrative has me thinking in the back of my head, um, all of these things are things I choose to do
A
so
hundred
that
percent.
I am not lonely.
Yes.
Um,
But I guess that goes back to like the whole thing. Like you can be in a room full of people and still feel lonely if you don't know them. And there's the other choice is that you have to forge connection. And it doesn't have to be this deep connection to people, like this really meaningful, like we're like, super friends, but you have to have a connection to them where they at least know things about you. Like I could go to a run club every week and do the run and go for the post beer and
not know anybody.
superficially socialize with everybody, but nobody actually really knows anything about me. You have to put the effort in to connect with those people, like learn about them. Are you married? Do you have
No,
kids?
and
What do
this is
you
just
do?
it.
What do you enjoy other than running? Making those kinds of connections.
Making those kinds of choices,
Yes.
making those choices to
Yes.
ask someone about themselves, to
Yes.
one, it's a choice to show up,
Yes.
and then it's a choice to step outside your comfort box and comment on the sexy beardy ginger guy's new shoes.
Right. Right.
Okay. um and then turns out that he's married with 4 kids, but connection made. Now you know he's married with 4
100%.
kids, and
100%. And there's
like,
always something like that you can connect with somebody on because our experiences are so broad, so vast. But I don't think I've ever met a person that I haven't found something that I can connect on, that I can be like, oh yeah, me too. I totally get that.
and I think we want everything to be 100 like, this is another part of the loneliness thing for me that just popped up. I feel like we want people to be samesies.
Yeah,
We
we
connect
do.
on all levels.
Right.
No.
No.
So to take my running club guy, he thinks Hoka's are the best shoes ever. And I'm
Terrible
like, you
shoes.
I'm like, you silly, silly fool.
Yes. Brooks
Everyone
for
knows.
life.
Merrill's. um, but that can be the connection. You can appreciate about each other that you are both raving lunatics
Yes.
about your thing.
Your
Oh my
particular
God,
brand
you're
of
so
shoe.
passionate about your shitty shoes. I
Yes.
too am passionate about my shitty shoes.
Yes.
And I'm willing to admit they might be shitty for other people in this group. And then you can bond over the fact that you don't bond.
Right. That your
Like,
lives aren't completely the same.
yes. I feel like we're so quick to it's the us and them thing. It's the tribal thing. It's the
Yes.
oh nope, not like me, out of the group.
Which
No, literally
ties
not
back
like
in
me can be in the group.
to dad, because it was like, oh, if you're a fisherman, but you're not a
Yes.
fly fisherman, if you're a hunter, but you're a gun hunter, not a bow hunter, if you're a this or that. And I think he got a lot of social connection by working at the pharmacy. He knew his patients well. He knew things about them and had that connection.
But coughed up nothing about himself.
Ever. And that's kind of like the missing piece of it, right? Like you can know things about other people, but that when you're not vulnerable and share about you.
And on that note, everybody, I was going to say, everybody rush out and read Brene Brown, the entire collection.
A to the men. Remember when I first introduced you to her and you're like, I don't really get it. Like now you get it, like the whole vulnerability
I get
thing.
a lot more of it for sure. And I did not mean to interrupt you. I just realized like how badly I just did that. I do it all the time.
It's okay.
It comes from passion, not assholeness.
Yes. Yes, it is. It's a shared thing. Like in order for somebody to be vulnerable with you and to make a connection that really matters, that's meaningful, both people have to show vulnerability and that it's safe to be vulnerable with that person. I think dad did that with Dave. I think dad did that with Brad. I think dad did that with maybe one or two other people in his life outside of us as family. He was even always vulnerable with us as family.
But he wanted certain things to appear that way, but he wanted a very tight rein on it because I feel like his best friend in the whole world had some very huge surprises at the end.
Yes.
What? What do you mean this is going on in his life and has been for years? I'm his best friend. No, I get that.
They had no idea. They had no idea.
Yeah, wool over your eyes, man.
No clue.
And
until mom asked them to go through the condo and remove all the alcohol, and they found all the alcohol and then hidden places. And it was like, I never heard Dave's response to it, but I heard Sherry's response to it. And she was just like, she's like, you're stunned. You're just like, did I really know this person? How did I miss this? Pitting out over there. I know hyperhidrosis runs in the family. No, and right, like even this person, his best friend, and they were friends for like what 40 something years. Yeah. They had no idea that he was full-blown non-functional alcoholic. No idea. And even when he stopped going fishing with them, there was no, they didn't think more to look into it, nor did he say at that point, like, never did he say, I need help.
No.
Ever.
No. Ever. Never. Even round one, we did not ever say we needed help.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why, like, when the relapse happened and I drove to Oak Creek to call you because we didn't have cell, like, this is how far remote his place is, you guys. There's no cell service. And I had to drive to Oak Creek, the nearest town, to call you and I'm like, I think he's relapsed. This is what's going on. And it was all the same things that you had witnessed when it happened the first time. And you're
Yeah.
like, 120% he has relapsed. This is not going to get any better. This is going to
Nope.
get worse. You need to get the fuck out.
Because the first time he didn't ask for help the first time. He had to be forced into help. And I mean, and then I understand that that doesn't work. Now I see that for myself. I mean, I've
Yeah.
lived through some of this stuff in different forms and stuff, but I get that you can't force someone.
Yeah.
And he never made that choice. And I think that's where, I mean, the rocky road was paved all the way at the beginning.
Yeah.
It was all a bargaining thing. It was quitting for something else, never quitting for himself.
Yes. Yes.
Which
There was not the true
I mean,
desire.
yeah, and I mean, there's huge compassion for the addiction side of that. I don't. The addiction side of all of that is completely different in my head than the loneliness side of that. Did one feed the other at some point, or vice versa? 100%.
Yeah.
But I mean, to stick on the track of just loneliness, I think there were choices he made in his life that aided the loneliness part of that along.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think he kept in contact with friends from like high school, college,
100% he did.
but never made the attempt or never made the effort to go and see them or, whatnot. It was always like he only connected with people in person when it was convenient to connect with them, easy to connect with them in person. There was no
for
effort in
sure.
that.
And I hate to for this podcast to sound like bagging on a dead guy, who's not here to defend himself, but I think that was a common theme. Is there's something in his head. I don't know if it was outright narcissism or, but the expectation was always on everyone else
Yes.
to come to him. And he made up excuses in the end that he didn't like this and he didn't like that and he didn't like this and he didn't like that. And I just, going through his stuff, I started seeing some of those things for the bullshit that they were.
Yeah.
So he couldn't fly.
Yeah. I was just
What?
about to say that.
You flew to Texas, you flew to California, you flew to Hawaii, you flew to Austria,
Mexico.
you flew to Mexico,
Yeah.
you flew back east, you flew to Denver. Like, what are you talking about? You don't like to fly. You flew everywhere.
Yeah.
What you mean is you don't want to fly out to see me.
Right. Right.
Because it
it's
doesn't,
too much of a hassle.
Yeah, it's too much of a hassle. But don't tell me that you've got some fear of flying when you've done nothing but spend multiple times a year flying.
Right. You had a timeshare in Hawaii.
Right.
Which requires flying.
Yeah, long flight, kid.
Yes.
And then we came to the drive thing, and it's like he drove all the way from Colorado to Washington, but couldn't make it the extra 2 hours south.
Right.
Um,
he even drove out at one point to see Jeannie after her stroke.
Yep.
He drove every single summer and we would go out to see Grandma and Grandpa Adams.
Right.
Drove there, drove back. How many times did him and Dave go up to South Dakota, North Dakota to go walleye fishing?
Oh my God, all the times. And when I was a kid, how many times did we just drive giant loops between Utah, Wyoming?
Yes.
Like on
camping,
fishing expeditions.
Yep.
Because fishing could never be fishing.
Yeah.
I know I sound super bitter. I really am not.
No, but it's I think what it is it's like you make these recognitions when somebody has passed.
Well, I think that he laid some of the guilt at our feet in certain ways.
Yeah.
And it's the like, well, I'm out here all by myself, so lonely,
Mm-hmm.
then do something about it.
Yeah. I can't tell you how
And
many texts I got after I left, and, oh, it's so quiet in the house without you and Crosby here. Okay, well,
right,
go get a dog, Dad. Go get a dog.
right,
That's half the equation right there. Um,
right. And I mean, it really was when he lost the cat. I think there's another one where we went real south, real fast in all of this,
yeah.
and you could have gotten another one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not saying it replaces it. Believe me,
Right.
we're gonna have to take a month off when Jesus Christ, we're
I
like
might
years and
need
years and
to.
years away, and I can still give myself massive crying
Oh
anxiety
God,
over
yes.
when this time is coming.
Uh, uh,
Um, but I mean, the point is like it took us almost no time at all after Samuel, previous pet, not a friend. I mean, a friend, the best friend.
yes.
But after Samuel passed, we were like, oh, we're gonna take our time, and then we came home to an empty house, and we were like, hell no, we're going out like by next
Yeah.
weekend and getting a damn dog. Because no, I don't want to sit in this house empty and not have someone greet me when I come home every day.
Yes.
I get it. I get needing that something in your
Companion.
life. So I made the choice to do something about it. I didn't sit by and
Right.
wait for baby Jesus to drop a dog down in the manger for me to find the next day. Jesus, no, like you
Yeah.
have to be proactive about your own life. I don't want to be lonely. I'm going to go get a dog. Done.
And I think, I think a big part of this, was a complete lack of awareness around this. Like, their generation didn't talk about these things. They didn't talk about these feelings. He had always been a very introverted person. He didn't really like people in general, whatever the root of that was. But for me, what I recognized was as soon as he stopped working, there was one lack of connection to people. And then shortly after that, COVID happened. And then he couldn't even see Dave and Brad. So now we're just stuck at home. And I honestly think that's when things got real bad, because now
For
you're
sure.
isolated. You can't see even your best friends. Now you're home, you're by yourself. There's booze, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think when the world reopened and he was able to connect again, I think that it had gone so far that it was at the level of like he pretty much had to drink all day long in order to not withdraw, have DTs, etc.
Okay.
Um,
Something else popped out there for me. And I mean, just it is bagging on the dead guy day, apparently. Um,
we love you. We love
I do.
you.
I do. I love him very much.
But I
Um,
mean, I
but
love him. I love his
so
I love him because of his imperfections too, because
right,
I've learned
absolutely.
from them.
Oh, oh, he was a roadmap of what not to do. Like, hello,
Yeah.
Berenstein Bears. Um, so here's another one that just popped up when you said that, though. So, mom, 5 years older than dad. Okay. Um, he refused to engage in any sort of technology, period. Period.
Yes.
Angry about it.
Had a track phone until
Had a track phone,
literally you couldn't buy track phone cards anymore.
pissed off, pissed off about email
Yes.
in 2020, pissed off about
Yes.
email. Like
Yes.
he was carrying that 90-year-old guy narrative clear back from what are we talking 90, 93, 94 is
Yeah.
about when I got an email address.
Yeah.
Um and just angry bitter about it.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Okay, well, you lost that war,
Which
but
is
you
such
should
a
have realized this in the
paradox.
2000s, okay? Like early 2000s, you should have realized you lost the email war.
Right.
Like it was very apparent this is the route we've
Like,
chosen as
didn't
a
like
society.
connecting with people in person, but yet at the same time was pissed about having some way to communicate with people
That
not in
wasn't
person.
personal.
Like, it was
Yep,
like, Do you yeah, that what a
Yep.
paradox there.
So all the way down, this is another. I was just thinking, like, he had the opportunity to Zoom, and then that popped up with me, and I was like, oh God, he would have, like, I would have listened to a 2 hour tirade
Yeah.
over how horrible Zoom was. And I'm like, oh, but wait, this goes back to another choice. And it's not that he was incapable. He always said, I'm too old to learn that stuff. Sorry, our
Yeah.
mom is 5 years older than you, and she is like a Zoom whiz on this shit.
Yeah,
She like Zooming
she
me
tweets
wine
all the
parties and
time.
stuff. Right? No, exactly. She's like, I refuse to call it X. It's Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, old lady.
Right.
Okay, we'll all agree as a family we're calling it Twitter for eternity. And yes, I mean, we won't talk about Elon. But as I mean, but she's in touch. She's like, she's
Yeah.
using social media. She knows that
She
she knows
uses
her way around a
emojis.
computer. Yes, like, too much. Uh, they're not an answer to everything, people.
I know.
Major
Oh
life news,
God.
and you get
Yes.
but anyways, there's another one of those things that he made a choice that, like,
Right.
he created this self narrative that technology is bad, and I refuse to be a part of it. And so I don't have a lot of sympathy when we're then making phone calls and saying, like, you just don't know how lonely it is out
Right.
here. Oh,
Right.
well, maybe we should get you a computer so we can Zoom. I would have never said that because I would not have wanted to have listened to it. Like,
Right.
the
Right.
tirade that followed, I would have never wanted to hear it. So it's like, okay, well, I'll try and call more often. Um, yeah, just, I mean, it makes me laugh there. Just, oh, I'm so lonely. Okay, well, he just kept putting bricks in the wall. He just kept,
Yes.
like, a little more mortar, another brick, a little more mortar, another brick,
I mean,
until
like
he
even
walled
him and
himself off.
Dave didn't text each other or call each other on the cell phones or anything.
Right.
They
It
just
was a
had like it was like
landline.
this a landline phone call that happened at the same time every morning, and it was like because I lived with them, so I heard this every day. It was like, "Hey, varmint, what's happening over there?" And then they would, do their banter back and forth, and then set up a time of when they were going to meet down at, the lake to go fishing. And are you going to call Brad, or do I need to call Brad and like fill Brad in? But it was all done via landline.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yep.
And
Because he
this
refused,
was
like,
circa 2015.
oh, I think it was later than that. I think it was probably clear to like 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
That we were still doing I mean, I know he was still doing the hardcore landline. He was doing landline till the day he died.
Yes. Like
Well, I should say the
quite
day he died, but
I mean, quite literally, that's when the landline got shut down, was like
okay.
right after the day he died. Because
Okay.
at that point it was like, why do we even have this?
Right. Have a landline when the rest of us have
Yes.
Wi-Fi and a cell phone.
Yes.
Um, but we're talking about someone who is in his 60s, not someone who is in his 90s.
Right.
This is someone who was definitely, was he in his 30s? Like when the intranets became a thing?
Yes.
30, 85? No. Oh yeah, 35 would have been 1990.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
more like 40s.
We're like 40.
Yeah, more like really 40s.
Yeah.
But I mean, well versed.
Yeah.
Well, oh, the man could look up recipes and song lyrics and
Yes.
sheet music
Yes.
just fine on the
He
internet.
was a pharmacist. Like that's hard stuff. Organic chemistry is not easy for a lot of people. It is definitely harder to understand organic chemistry than it is to understand the internet.
Right. For sure. Okay, so take a moment and roll back through your statistics for me.
You what?
Take a moment and roll back through your statistics for me.
Okay. 52% of Americans report feeling lonely.
Okay.
I think that's just in general, right?
Sure.
47% report their relationships with others aren't meaningful.
Okay.
Las Vegas, which I get Las Vegas, and I also get Washington, D.C. I was shocked by Denver.
Oh,
Are
I'm
the
not.
Really? Are the three
Yeah.
loneliest cities in the US? Statistics show loneliness is 3 times higher than the national average in those cities. 58% of Americans or reported that they sometimes or always feel like no one knows them well. Statistics show that 1 in 3 people, or close to 33% of people in the US, experience loneliness on a regular basis. Now, that's the statistic that whatever his name is, the Surgeon General, used,
Uh,
because 1 in 3 people is higher
Vivek Murthy.
than the that is higher than the rate of depression.
Right.
Because I want to say it's like 1 in 10 people is depressed, and this
Like,
is 1 in 3 people or
sure.
something like that.
I mean, and I think there's probably going to be some overlap laying there.
For sure. I mean,
Um,
yeah, yeah. 61% of younger people, so this was under the age of 24, in the US, said that they are chronically lonely.
right. So,
That one I think is social media 120%, because they
oh,
never
I
learned how to connect like we did before
no, for
all
sure.
this technology.
Yeah, when I say these things are a choice, I'm not saying um that they're like there aren't avenues that have made it way worse. I mean, it definitely. And so, I mean, 1 in 3 people regular, or wait, 1 in 3, 33%. What? Say it again.
Okay,
Sorry.
statistics show that 1 in 3 people, or close to 33% of people in the US, experience loneliness on a regular basis.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of contributing factors to that. And so I'm going to loop that one back into why I think Denver makes perfect sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that's probably the top three, but I think if you took the top 10, you would see a trend in these cities that have had exponential growth over the last
Mm,
few years as they're being flooded by outsiders. I'm an
yes.
outsider, folks. Um, because these people are like not happy with where they're at. They're uprooting their entire lives. They're breaking those connections that they had in the place that they were
Yeah.
to go someplace new, which sounds great until you get there and realize a couple things. One, you don't know anybody.
Right.
So it took us almost a full year of being here to start making those connections.
Yeah.
They're in year number two. We're coming up on year number two. They are just now starting to like bloom. They
Right.
budded a year ago. They're starting to bloom. We're starting to have a busy social calendar. Um, but that has taken 2 full years
Mm-hmm.
to get to this point where if you said, do you have friends in Knoxville? I would say, yeah, we have a lot of friends.
Yeah.
Um, and by that, like we went to dinner last week with some friends. Um, I say some friends because like that was the first time we've ever gone over to their place for dinner ever.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually the first time we've hung out solo ever.
Yeah.
Um, but we've made a conscious choice to put ourselves out there and try and get to know some of these people that keep showing up at group functions. And I will say we've definitely lucked out in that we've met some people that have huge friend groups and we got invited to their party, and then
Right.
you meet all the other people, and we've kind of picked like, hey, but here's the choice part and the vulnerable part. Ask for someone's number. Hey, we should hang out sometime. We seem to have a
Yes.
lot in common. Um, and then it can be as simple. Sometimes they're weird and they don't seem very social, but you start laying down that framework. Anybody
Yeah.
interested? Group text. Anybody interested in going to see this movie next week?
Yeah.
Dune premiered. Who? Anybody in to go see Dune?
Yep.
And then you start finding out who all your sci-fi nerds are,
Right.
and you're like, oh, we should probably like invite them to dinner one night. So the movie is just like we don't even talk. Like you talk 5 minutes in the foyer, and then 5 minutes afterwards before you hit your car. So you spent
Right.
10 minutes with these people, outside of the dark movie. But the next time you get together, you
Yep.
talk about what you thought about the movie. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I've already started laying the groundwork for this move because I knew that I knew some people that had some connections to where I'm going. And so I
right,
reached out to them and it was just like, hey, guess what? Moving here. Just wondering, do you have any connections that might be able to help with housing or people that are into doing some of the more outdoorsy stuff that I can connect with and have like a hiking buddy, that kind of thing.
right.
And putting those feelers out, it's like I've already got like 4 or 5 connections that I haven't met them in person yet, but I've gotten their phone numbers and we've connected by text and said like, hey, yeah, when you get here, reach out and let's go meet for
Right.
coffee. Let's go do this.
And
Because it
then you
was a
have to be
choice,
vulnerable and reach
right?
out.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And it was
You
a
had to make the
choice because
choice
it
on
was
the
like,
front side.
I don't want to get to this place. And when I got to Tucson, for sure, I knew 2 people and they are now gone to Salt Lake City. So I literally know like my coworkers and that's it. And then the people that I volunteer with. But it was like I knew that there was a period here where I felt very lonely, especially when Lauren and Ryan left and I hadn't started volunteering yet. It was like,
Sure.
I feel lonely. Okay, what do I need to do to fix this? I started volunteering, so I met people through that. Um, you make these decisions, and I only do like DoorDash or order the groceries online and pick them up when it's like I'm slammed that week and I just don't have the time to deal with like the grocery store, the whole experience. But I think it's a choice. Denver was weird for me because I can honestly say, looking back, other than Dallas, which I was there for so long, and we had an amazing friend group that we built over a very long period of time. But Denver was the least lonely I'd ever felt. I had so many friends until the legalization of marijuana, and then California moved in and the whole paradigm changed, right? It went from a place where it was like, 3 degrees to somebody else that you knew in Denver to now nobody knows who the fuck anybody is
Right.
anymore.
No, for sure. And so that's what else I was saying is you get this huge influx. There's all of these people that are new, and maybe some of them know each other. Or I mean, in there, like I think sometimes in places like that, they're bringing a whole different culture. They're bringing sometimes I think probably some of their friend groups. This person is out and they write back home and they're right back home. Who writes?
I think we should start writing again though.
Right. Oh, so do I. But the word spreads, and then your friend moved here, and then you have that connection, and so you brought that thing from over here, and you're no longer contributing to like the people that are here. I think there's also some us and them stuff going
Oh
on.
yeah.
Um, and I get it, like especially when there's such an influx, and then you've destroyed the culture of the place that everyone moved to. Um, I understand that some
Yeah.
bitterness involved in that, but I think when you get to that size of a like Denver's insane.
It is.
And I think if I'd be very interested in knowing like the percentage of native Denverites.
Which is the big thing
Right.
in Colorado. Like, are you native?
To total population because
Yeah.
I think there's I think all of this influx and then there hasn't been enough time for these people to get to know each other. Throw in COVID, throw in all of these
Yep.
things that isolate us. And I think certain places attract a certain type of personality. Seattle
Mm-hmm.
was definitely like the tech
Yes.
sector,
Yeah.
which from personal, from anecdotal experience, not the most social individuals on the planet.
No, I mean,
Um,
it literally, you can you can Google Seattle freeze, and there's a whole
And
Wikipedia page
it's
about it.
no,
Not
for
kidding.
sure.
I'm not kidding.
No,
It's
it's
like
a
this
thing.
is a thing.
Um, but and so I feel like, I mean, that one's got its own name, but I think there's a special version of that in Denver.
Yeah,
I mean, I think Las Vegas is self-explanatory, but I
100%.
think if you opened up that 3 town list to 10 towns, every single one on there would be like an exponential growth city, and it just
Yeah.
hasn't had time to
Yeah. Well, Washington,
for those
D.C. also
connections
makes
to be
sense to
made.
me because it's like
Roll in, roll out
politicians.
the whatever the election cycle is.
Right. Plus, it's like, I mean, you're either in or you're out. It's just politics. I really think that's what Washington, D.C. is. I mean, but again, like Vegas makes sense to me too, because it's a very transient um place.
Yeah,
But
I
just
could see it
just
because it's a tourist city. Like that's
yeah,
all it is.
yeah,
Like the stagnant population in Las Vegas, I have a feeling is not that large.
right.
Um, but the transient population is probably huge, and
Yeah.
it's hard to make friends when you're transient.
Very, very true. Very, very true. Um, so okay. So we tied this into dad a little bit and like his loneliness and maybe how that played a part in his ultimate demise. Um, but I mean, obviously Vivek Murphy is that, am I right?
Yep, the
Surgeon General.
yeah,
And this was several months ago. I want to say this is like maybe September that he came out with the Surgeon General's report that we have a loneliness epidemic in the US. And I'm sure plenty of these statistics come from that research. And I guess for me, I think like ultimately what I would want somebody to take away from this podcast, at least from my part, is it's a thing. It's a real thing. And
agreed.
one of the biggest factors that determines longevity is the connections that you have in your life, the relationships that you have in your life. They have found that this is more important than your cardiovascular health, is the connections that you have, especially later in your life. So thinking of it from that aspect, I think kind of what we've talked about too. If you're lonely, start looking at like what are some of the small steps I can take to start connecting more with people, whether that be going to get my groceries, whether that be finding a trivia night with maybe the just one friend that you can find to go to trivia night and you start meeting other people. If you like to run, go join a run club and challenge yourself to talk to one new person every week at the run club. They're not all going to become your friends, but you're doing the work to reduce the loneliness, to create connections, and you never know who you're going to find. You might find somebody who ends up being like your BFF for life
Right?
in those situations. um I personally would say spend less time on social media and more time connecting with people IRL. Look how relevant I am. um to foster true connection, to foster true relationship building. What would be your takeaways?
I mean, I think it was a great analogy to compare it to your cardiovascular health. Sitting there bitching that you're out of breath when you go up a flight of stairs is not going to improve anything. Period. I mean, and I don't think that's up for debate. um, I think that's pretty common knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel the same way. I mean, I don't disagree at all with the importance of connection um, at all. I would just say you would never sit there and expect your cardiovascular health to improve on its own.
Yeah.
Nor should you expect your social problems to fix themselves all on their own. Both of those things require, they have the same recipe for improving them. which is small steps and
Yep.
consistency, and it's paying attention to the fact that it is a problem.
Mhm.
Um, and again, sitting there complaining about your physical health won't do anything. Don't
Right.
complain about being lonely. Um, do set those goals the same way you would with any other aspect of your life,
Yep.
and then chip away at them one at a time. When you've got one mastered, add a little bit more. When you've got another mastered, add a little bit more. Because I do think we're social creatures. I do believe that we're
Yeah.
supposed to all interact, and I think that is what rounds out a fulfilled life that has meaning. I mean, I think what a better meaning than to look at it from the perspective of the lives you touched and interacted with. Um, but that doesn't just happen.
Yes. And it
You
it
have
it
to make
does
it
take
happen.
it does take work with the thing here.
Everything takes work.
Here we come back to like the instant gratification thing that it's like, so now 38 episodes into the podcast and all the different guests that I've had. Some of them I have been connecting with more, some of them I haven't connected with since we even did the recording. Um it takes work to do that. And it's
Yep.
something that I recognize that I'm like, I need to carve out like an hour or two maybe in my week simply to reach out to the people that have been guests on the
Yeah.
podcast and say, how are things going? And it's been, so long since we did the podcast. I'd love to hear what's going on in your life. It's taking that time, it's putting that effort forward to make that connection. Yes, that's digital, but I can think of so many digital relationships. Like I did the IPEC coach training program during, like
Right.
in the hot mix of COVID.
Right.
And I've now met 3 people that were in my cohort in
Right.
person because we kept the
But that
connection
took
up and we
effort.
made the
That
effort to meet
there.
in person. And
Yep.
so I think that's what it comes down to. Um, yeah,
It's all work, people. It's all work.
it's all work. It's all work, but it's important work. And don't be lonely. If you're feeling lonely, first of all, realize that it's not just you. 52% of Americans feel lonely. Um, but be a part of the change.
Yes.
Change the statistic
Change yourself. Make yourself
and
happy.
send us emails, connect with us, and
Absolutely.
share about your loneliness and find community, I think, through the different avenues of life.
Be the community. I mean, start the
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
Doesn't already have to be there.
Amen. All right,
All right.
B. So much fun. Again,
Always.
I love solving problems with you.
Right.
Okay.